The Ember Vein Tree had burned every false bride who touched it. That was why they brought me to its roots. Not to bless my marriage. To prove I had no right to survive it. The dragon court gathered beneath the open roof of the Ashen Grove, where black branches twisted toward a blood-red moon, and the air smelled of smoke, winter roses, and old vows. At the center of the grove stood the tree itself, ancient and leafless, its bark dark as charred bone. Thin veins ran beneath the surface of the trunk, dull red and nearly dead, like embers waiting under ash. The court called it a living relic. I thought it looked like something buried upright. My bridal gown was white, because they wanted the burning to show. The silk had been sewn too tight at the ribs and left loose at the throat, where the cursed mark on my collarbone could be seen by everyone. 3 black petals, shaped like a dying flame. The mark had appeared on me at birth, and every village healer who saw it had crossed herself before touching my skin. Cursed bride, ash blood, bed omen, a woman whose wedding fire would turn against the house that claimed her. The dragon court had more elegant names for cruelty, but cruelty did not become kinder, because nobles pronounced it softly. Lady Sorel stood beneath the silver canopy beside the altar, wearing red silk and a crown of tiny gold leaves. She was not queen, not anymore, though half the court still moved around her as if she were. Once, she had been Dragon King Vaelor's chosen bride. The song said she had saved his life during the Eastern Plague. The court said she had stepped aside out of devotion when the king refused to marry again. But no woman stepped aside and remained that close to the throne without leaving chains behind. Sorel looked at me with a smile gentle enough to be admired. "Do not be afraid, Ilyra," she said. That was how noble women sharpen knives in public. They spoke softly while handing you to the blade. I kept my hands folded before me. "I am not afraid of a tree." A few nobles laughed. Sorel's smile did not move. "Then perhaps you misunderstand what the tree is." Before I could answer, the grove fell silent. Dragon King Vaelor Draven entered through the iron archway. The court lowered at once, heads bowing, wings folding, whispers dying beneath the weight of his presence. Vaelor was tall, broad-shouldered, and dressed in black ceremonial armor veined with dull gold. His dark hair fell loose around a face too beautiful to be merciful, and his eyes burned a deep, molten amber that never seemed to warm anything they touched. Behind him moved the shadow of his dragon, not fully visible, not summoned, only an enormous darkness sliding over the grove stones, horned and winged, its chest hollow where fire should have lived. I saw that hollow place and forgot to breathe for one breath. The cursed mark on my collarbone ached like it recognized the wound. No one else reacted, so either they could not see it, or they had learned not to. Vaelor stopped before the Ember Vein Tree. His gaze moved over me once, cold and brief, then to the mark at my collarbone. Something flickered in his eyes. Disgust, perhaps, or recognition. "The rite begins," he said. His voice was low, controlled, and empty, in a way that made the grove feel colder. Lady Sorel stepped closer to him, just enough for the court to notice. "Your Majesty, the old law is clear. A bride accused of carrying cursed fire must touch the Ember Vein Tree before the marriage flame is lit. If she is false, the tree burns her from within. If she is true, the roots accept her." "And if the tree remains silent?" I asked. Sorel looked at me as if I were a child who had spoken during a funeral. "It never remains silent." A priest of the Ash Temple approached with a bowl of black water. "Ilyra Vale, daughter of the fallen Ashenmere line, chosen under emergency bride law to stabilize the western dragon houses, you will place your right hand upon the trunk and speak your claim." My claim, as if I had chosen any of this. I had been brought from a border keep 3 days ago with soldiers at my door and a royal marriage order in a sealed black tube. The western houses were restless. The court needed old blood to calm them. My mother's line had once been tied to dragon root rites before it was ruined, disgraced, and renamed Unlucky. Now the throne wanted my blood, but not my curse. Convenient. The priest dipped 2 fingers into the black water and marked my wrist. It burned cold. Vaelor watched, without expression. That stung more than I wanted it to. Not because I knew him. I did not. Not truly. I knew only the stories. The Dragon King who survived plague fire. The ruler whose heart never softened. The man whose first bride loved him so purely she let him go. The court called him untouchable. The border villages called him heart-buried. I had thought that was poetry. Then I saw the hollow in his dragon shadow. The priest stepped back. Speak. I looked at the Ember Vein Tree. Its black bark seemed to drink moonlight. My fingers trembled once. I hated that. Sorel saw and lowered her gaze to hide a smile. Her fingers tightened around the gold leaf crown, not with pity, but anticipation. So I stopped, trembling. That had been my skill since childhood, not surviving because I was fearless, but refusing to let fear become entertainment. I am Ilyra Vale, I said, voice clear enough to reach the balconies. Daughter of Ashenmir's last branch, bride by royal order, not by plea. A murmur moved through the court. Vaelor's eyes sharpened. Sorel's smile vanished for one breath. Good. I lifted my right hand and pressed it to the Ember Vein Tree. The grove waited for me to burn. Nothing happened. No flame, no scream, no curse climbing through my veins. The black water on my wrist slid into the bark. The tree drank it. Then the dull red veins beneath the trunk flared bright gold. A pulse moved through the roots. Once, the court froze. A second pulse followed. Deeper, louder. The tree began to beat like a heart. Vaelor Stego. Not much. Not enough for a weaker court to notice. But I saw the moment his hand pressed against his chest, as if something inside him had been struck awake. The dragon shadow behind him reared back. In its hollow chest, red gold fire flickered. The Ember Vein Tree's roots split the stone beneath my feet and wrapped around my wrist, not burning, not binding, but recognizing. Lady Sorel stepped back. No, she whispered. The tree beat harder. Blood-red light climbed the trunk, forming words in ancient root script across the bark. His heartfire sleeps here. The court erupted. Vaelor stared at the tree, then at me, his molten eyes no longer empty. For the first time, the Dragon King looked afraid of feeling something, and beneath my palm, the Ember Vein Tree whispered in a voice made of roots, ash, and a heart that had been buried alive. Bride found, and Lady Sorel's smile died before the court could pretend it had never been there. The Ashen Grove did not know what to do with a bride who failed to burn. For one breath, the entire dragon court stood frozen beneath the blood-red moon, while the Ember Vein Tree beat like a living heart. Its red gold veins pulsed under black bark, carrying light from the roots wrapped around my wrist, up through the trunk, and into the twisted branches above. Each beat rolled through the stone beneath us. Once, twice, again. Vaelor's hand remained pressed to his chest. The gesture was small, but nothing about the Dragon King was ever small in public. He had built a reign out of stillness. Men had surrendered cities because he looked at burning walls without flinching. Nobles had killed their own ambitions because his silence promised worse than anger. Now his fingers dug into his armor, as if something beneath it had moved for the first time in years. Lady Sorel recovered before the court did. "Remove her from the tree," she said. No one obeyed at first. Not because they respected me, because the roots around my wrist had begun to glow brighter, and every dragon in the grove had lowered its head. Not fully, not kneeling, but enough. Enough for the court to see. The ash priest stumbled back from me, his bowl slipping from his hands. Black water spilled across the stone and ran toward the roots instead of away from them. The Ember Vein Tree drank that too. Vaelor's eyes moved from the tree to me. "What did you do?" he asked. His voice was low, but something rough lived beneath it now. Something almost human. I should have been afraid. I was. But fear had sharpened into anger. I touched what you ordered me to touch. A few nobles hissed. Sorel's gaze cut toward me. "Careful, bride." The tree beat harder. Bride. Not cursed. Not false. Bride. The word moved through the roots and into my bones until the black petal mark on my collarbone began to burn. I looked down and saw the 3 dark petals shifting under my skin. Their edges lit red gold, not like a curse spreading, but like embers being uncovered. Sorel saw it. So did Vaelor. His expression changed again, so quickly most of the court would miss it, but I did not. I was too close to the tree, too close to the pulse that answered his chest. Recognition, not of me, of the wound. Sorel stepped toward the roots. The tree is reacting to Ashenmere blood. That line was always unstable near living relics. The safest course is to cut her free before the heartfire corrupts the grove. Quit. The word slid through the court like permission. 2 guards moved forward with crescent blades. The roots tightened around my wrist. Pain flashed through me, not burning, not crushing, but warning. A red-gold pulse shot from the roots into the ground. The stone split before the guards' boots. Both men stopped. Vaelor lifted one hand. Back. The guards obeyed him instantly. Sorel turned to him. "Your Majesty," I said back. This time, the command was not only for the guards. The grove went silent. Sorel lowered her eyes, but not quickly enough to hide the fury in them. The Ember Vein Tree's bark cracked open at the center of the trunk. A thin stream of red-gold light spilled from within, forming the shape of a heart made not of flesh, but of flame folded around roots. With each beat, Vaelor's breath changed. He looked as if the air had become too sharp to swallow. I stared at the glowing heart inside the tree. Something inside me reached toward it. Not desire, not power, grief. I did not understand that until the tree opened a memory, the grove vanished. Or perhaps it only grew older. I saw Vaelor years before, younger but already crowned, lying on a stone bed beneath the same tree. His armor was torn open. Black veins crawled across his chest, and dragonfire bled from his mouth in thin red lines. Beside him knelt Sorel, her red gown soaked at the hem, her gold leaf crown hanging crooked in her hair. She was crying. That surprised me. Her hands were pressed over Vaelor's heart, and the Ember Vein Tree's roots had entered his chest like black serpents. "You will die if I leave it inside you," she whispered. Vaelor's younger face twisted in pain. "Then let me die with it." "No," her voice broke. "You do not get to leave me with a throne full of wolves wearing dragon masks. This is not love." Sorel bent over him, forehead nearly touching his. "No, it is survival." Then she pulled something red gold from his chest. Heartfire. Vaelor's body arched. His dragon shadow screamed without sound. Sorel pressed the heartfire into the roots of the Ember Vein Tree. The trunk swallowed it. Vaelor's eyes opened, alive but emptied, as if every warm thing in him had been buried where no hand could reach. The memory shattered. I was back in the ashen grove with my palm against the tree, and my breath caught in my throat. The court had seen it, all of it. Vaelor stood motionless. Sorel had gone white. The Dragon King looked at her, as if he were seeing not a former bride, not a savior, but a jailer, who had kissed the lock after closing it. "You buried it," he said. Sorel's lips parted. "I saved your life." The tree beat once. False. The word appeared in root script, burning red gold across the bark. Sorel flinched as if struck. A second line formed beneath it. She saved the king. Then a third. She imprisoned the heart. The court erupted. Vaelor did not. That was more frightening. He turned slowly toward the Ember Vein Tree. The hollow in his dragon shadow was no longer dark. A small fire flickered there, weak and furious, reaching toward the heart buried in the roots. I felt the roots around my wrist loosen, not releasing me, inviting me deeper. The tree whispered again, but this time the voice moved through both of us. Bride found, heart awake. Then the bark split wider, and inside the glowing heartfire appeared a shadow shaped like a woman's hand wrapped around it. Sorel's hand, and its fingers tightened. Sorel's invisible grip closed around the heartfire. Vaelor made no sound, but the Ember Vein Tree did. Its roots groaned beneath the ashen grove, splitting stone in long black lines that ran outward through the court. Nobles stumbled away from the cracks. Ash priests clutched their prayer chains. The dragons perched along the open roof stirred restlessly, their wings scraping against black marble and iron vines. The heart inside the tree beat harder, too hard. Each pulse struck Vaelor's chest like a blow. He took one step back, jaw clenched, but his dragon shadow lurched forward toward the trunk, hollow ribs blazing with desperate red-gold light. It looked starved, not for blood, not for conquest, for itself. I felt the pain through the roots around my wrist. It entered me as heat, then grief, then an ache so intimate I nearly pulled away. But the tree did not burn me. It held me. Sorel's voice cut through the chaos. Do you see now? The heartfire is unstable. If it returns to him without control, it will kill him. Vaelor's eyes remained fixed on the glowing hand around his heartfire. You said you removed it to save me. I did. The tree answered, in root script. Half truth. Sorel's face tightened. The court read the word. I did too. And suddenly the memory we had seen changed meaning. Sorel had saved his life, yes, but salvation had not required a prison. Love had not required ownership. A heart could be protected without being buried, where only she knew how to reach it. Vaelor turned toward her. Why did I never feel the absence? Sorel's mouth trembled, but only for a moment. Because I made sure you could still rule. No. His voice dropped so low the grove itself seemed to listen. You made sure I could not choose. The words struck her harder than anger would have. For the first time, I saw something real in Sorel's eyes. Not guilt. Not yet. Fear wrapped around an older wound. I watched the plague fire hollow you out, she said. I watched councilmen gather outside your chamber discussing which province would kneel first when you died. I watched your dragon claw the stone until its talons cracked. I did what no one else was strong enough to do. You took my heart fire. I kept it beating. For whom? Silence. The Ember Vein Tree pulsed once, and the red-gold veins under my hand brightened until I saw deeper inside the trunk. Not only Vaelor's heartfire lived there. Other ember shapes glimmered in the roots, smaller, dimmer, some nearly ash. I frowned. There are more. Sorel's eyes snapped to me. Vaelor turned. The tree responded to my voice. Its roots loosened from my wrist and crawled up my forearm, not painfully, but with terrible purpose. The black petal mark on my collarbone flared so bright I gasped. A new memory opened. This one did not belong to Vaelor. It belonged to the tree. I saw brides across generations brought to the ashen grove in white gowns. Some trembled. Some wept. Some stood proudly, because they believed love had chosen them. Each pressed a hand to the Ember Vein Tree, and each screamed as black roots entered her chest. The court called them false brides, but the tree showed me what burned, not deceit, a thread, a living ember thread reaching from those women toward royal dragon hearts. Some had been true brides. Some had carried old mate fire. Some had awakened warmth in kings. The court preferred cold, and every time, someone had called that warmth dangerous. The tree burned the bride, and kept the ember. I staggered. Vaelor's face darkened. "What did you see?" I looked at Sorel. The tree did not start as a test. The ash priests began muttering. Sorel's expression sharpened. "Careful. It was a vault." The roots pulsed in agreement. Vaelor turned toward the priests. "Is that true?" No one answered. One old priest finally bowed his head. In the First Age, the Ember Vein Tree held royal heartfire during plague, war, or dragon madness. It was meant to preserve life until a true Ember Vein bride could return it safely. "Then why does it burn brides?" His voice carried no mercy. The old priest swallowed. "Because the court changed the rite," Sorel spoke quickly. "Because false brides killed kings. Because ambitious women learned to mimic mate fire and bind themselves to dragons for power." "Some," I said. Every eye turned to me. I felt the roots moving under my skin now, carrying knowledge I had not earned, and pain I had not asked for. Some were false, some were not. The tree knows the difference, but someone taught the court to call every bride dangerous unless she could be controlled. Sorel's red gown flickered with reflected fire. "You know nothing of control." "No," I said. "I know what it feels like to be called a curse because people fear what your blood might wake." The Ember Vein Tree beat once. The black petals at my collarbone opened. Not on my skin. Ornate. 3 red gold lines spread from the mark like veins of living fire, down my chest and into my right arm. The court recoiled. A noblewoman whispered that I was burning from within, but I felt no burn. I felt roots. Old roots. Eschenmere roots. The tree's voice moved through the grove. Ember Vein bride. The ash priests fell to their knees. Sorel did not. Vaelor stared at me, his molten eyes wide with something he could not hide quickly enough. Hope frightened him more than pain. The tree's trunk split again, revealing Vaelor's heartfire trapped beneath Sorel's shadow hand. Around it, the smaller ember shapes pulsed weakly, the stolen heartfires and bride embers of everyone the old rite had consumed. The grove trembled. The tree whispered again. "Return requires witness." Sorel lifted her hand slowly. The gold leaves in her crown began to glow red. "If she witnesses it," Sorel said, her voice soft now, almost sorrowful, "she will see everything." Vaelor's gaze did not leave me. "Everything?" Sorel looked at him then. The mask broke, just enough to show the wound beneath. "Every feeling I cut from you," she said, "including the ones that were never mine. Every feeling I cut from you." The words did not echo through the ashen grove. They sank into the roots, into the black stone, into the lungs of every noble who had once praised Lady Sorel as the woman who saved the Dragon King, and expected that saving to remain clean. Vaelor stood before her without moving. The red gold fire in his dragon shadow flickered inside its hollow chest, weak and furious, as if it had heard something it had been waiting years to answer. "What feelings?" he asked. Sorel's jaw tightened. The Ember Vein Tree answered for her. Its roots tightened around my forearm, and the red gold veins beneath my skin burned brighter. I felt the tree's demand before I understood it. Witness was not simply watching. Witness meant letting the buried truth move through me without turning away. A root rose from the ground and touched my collarbone mark. Pain flashed white. The grove vanished. I stood inside Vaelor's memory. Not as myself. Not fully. More like a flame caught inside someone else's chest. The first memory was quiet. Vaelor, younger, standing in a rain-dark courtyard with Sorel. He was not yet the empty king the court knew. His eyes were warmer then, still guarded, but alive. Sorel stood close enough to touch him, her red cloak soaked through, gold leaves in her hair. He was laughing at something she had said. The sound startled me. The Dragon King could laugh. Or he had. Once. The memory shifted. A plague chamber. Vaelor on the stone bed, dying from heartfire fever. Sorel kneeling beside him, weeping, cutting her own palm and pressing it to the roots. She pulled the fire from him because if she did not, the fever would tear him apart. That part was true. The tree let me feel it. Sorel's terror, her love, her desperation. Then the memory darkened. Vaelor survived. He opened his eyes after the rite and reached weakly for her hand. "Sorel," he whispered. She took his hand. For one fragile breath. It could have ended there. She could have returned what she had taken after the fever passed. She could have let the tree hold his heartfire only until his body was strong enough to bear it again. Instead, she looked toward the chamber door. Outside, council voices argued in low tones. If the king wakes still attached to her, she rules him. If he marries her now, the eastern houses gain the crown. If his heartfire remains unstable, another bride could claim the root bond. Sorel heard them all. Her tears stopped. She turned back to Vaelor, still too weak to rise, and placed one hand over the root pulsing with his heartfire. "Sleep," she whispered. The root obeyed. Vaelor's eyes went still. His hand fell from hers. The memory tightened around my throat. She had not only buried pain, she had buried longing, tenderness, desire, trust. The part of him that might have chosen her freely, and the part that might one day choose someone else. The grove returned around me with a violent breath. I staggered. Vaelor was suddenly there, one hand lifted as if to catch me. He stopped before touching. His restraint was not cold now. It was effort. "What did you see?" he asked. I looked at Sorel. For the first time, she looked afraid of me. "She saved you," I said. A faint relief moved through the court. Then I finished. "And then she kept saving you from every feeling that could make you leave her shadow." The relief died. The Ember Vein Tree beat once. "True." Sorel's face hardened. "You speak like a girl who has never watched a kingdom circle a dying man." "No," I said. "I speak like a girl who knows the difference between saving a life and owning what survives." A murmur moved through the grove. Vaelor looked at Sorel, and something raw flickered behind his eyes. Not love, not hatred. Something worse. Recognition. Without memory's mercy. "You let me live," he said. "Then you made sure I could not love." Sorel's lips trembled. "I made sure love could not kill you." The tree answered. Love did not kill him. Another pulse. Fear did. The words burned across the bark, red gold and undeniable. Sorel stepped back, as if the tree itself had struck her. The smaller ember shapes inside the roots flared, one by one. Brides, kings, mates, hearts, stored, cut, delayed, preserved too long until protection became possession. I felt them pressing toward me, not asking me to carry them, asking me to name the difference. Vaelor's dragon shadow lowered its head toward the tree. The hollow in its chest glowed brighter. The shadow hand around the heartfire tightened again. Sorel lifted her chin. "If you return it all at once, he burns." The old ash priest flinched. Vaelor heard. "Is that true?" The priest lowered his head. "Heartfire buried too long may not know its body. If released without an ember vein witness, it could consume him." "And with one?" Vaelor asked. Every eye turned to me. The root around my wrist pulsed. I understood the answer before the priest said it. "With one," the old priest whispered. "The bride can guide it home." Sorel laughed softly. "Guide it? She can barely stand." That was true. The root fire inside me had not made me invincible. It had made me open. Every pulse of Vaelor's heartfire shook through my bones. Every stolen ember in the tree breathed against my skin. I was not powerful because I could survive anything. I was standing because, if I fell, the court would call it proof. Vaelor stepped closer. "Do not do this because they forced you here," he said. The words moved through me strangely. A king who had ordered me to touch the tree now telling me I did not have to save him. Too late. And yet, not meaningless. "I am not doing it for the court," I said. His eyes held mine. "Then why?" I looked at the tree, at the heartfire trapped inside roots, at the smaller stolen embers, at Sorel, who had loved until love rotted into control, at the dragon shadow hollowed by survival. "Because if the tree keeps every heart people were afraid to return," I said, "then none of us are alive. We are only preserved." The Ember Vein Tree shuddered. The roots released my wrist. For one breath, I thought it was letting me go. Then, the ground split before me, revealing the root heart beneath the trunk. A living knot of black wood and red gold flame wrapped around Vaelor's heartfire, and dozens of dimmer ember threads. The tree whispered, "Choose what returns first." Sorel's eyes widened. Vaelor looked at the root heart, then at me. "What does that mean?" I felt the answer in the black petals burning beneath my skin. His heartfire could not be returned whole. Not yet. The first feeling had to be chosen, the one that would teach the others the way home. Sorel understood, and that was why terror crossed her face. "No," she said. I looked at Vaelor. The Dragon King stood with all the court watching him, powerful enough to burn cities, helpless before the missing pieces of his own heart. "What was the first thing she cut from you?" I asked. He did not answer. The Ember Vein Tree did. A memory rose between us. Vaelor reaching for Sorel's hand after the plague, not with desire, not with command, but with simple trust. The first stolen ember glowed. Trust. Sorel lunged toward the root heart. Vaelor moved faster. His hand closed around her wrist before she could touch the tree. But the root heart had already opened, and the stolen ember of trust flew straight into my chest. Trust entered me like fire with teeth. I gasped and folded over the root heart, one hand pressed to my chest as the stolen ember burned through places no flame had touched before. It was not my trust. That was what made it terrible. It was Vaelor's young, wounded, newly alive after plague fire, reaching for the woman beside his bed because he had believed her hands meant safety. The ember did not belong in me, but the tree had sent it there because I could feel the path it needed. A bridge. That was what an ember vein bride was. Not a vessel. Not a sacrifice. Not a pretty name for a woman thrown into fire until the court decided whether she was useful. A bridge between buried heartfire and the body it had been stolen from. Vaelor still held Sorel's wrist near the opened root heart. His fingers were tight enough to stop her, but not cruel enough to break bone. Even now, even after seeing what she had done, some missing part of him refused to become the kind of monster the court would understand. Sorel saw that. Her face twisted. "You feel it, don't you?" she whispered to him. "That hesitation, that softness. That is why I took it." Vaelor's jaw tightened. "You took it because you feared what I would become without you?" "No." Her eyes flashed. "I feared what you would give away." The trust ember burned brighter inside me. A memory opened through it. Vaelor in a council chamber months after the plague, healed but hollow, listening as border lords demanded executions for villages that had refused plague levies. His face was cold. Sorel stood behind him, one hand resting on the arm of his chair, her gold leaf crown bright beneath the torchlight. The old Vaelor, the one before the burial, would have asked why starving villagers had refused. He would have sent healers first, soldiers after. This Vaelor signed the order, not with cruelty, with absence. Sorel watched his hand move and closed her eyes in relief. The memory cut away. I looked at her horrified. You did not only keep him from loving. The tree beat once. I forced the words out. You kept him from mercy. The grove went silent. Vaelor's hand loosened around Sorel's wrist. Not enough for her to escape. Only enough for pain to show in the space between his fingers. Sorel's voice dropped. Mercy kills kings. No, I said. Fearful courts do. The root heart pulsed beneath me. Trust moved from my chest down my arm, drawn toward Vaelor. Instinct told me to let it pass. Terror told me to stop. If I guided the ember wrong, it could burn through both of us. If I held it too long, it would root in me and become another stolen thing. I stepped toward him. The court watched every breath. Vaelor's eyes met mine. For the first time since I had seen him enter the grove, they did not look empty. They looked dangerous in a new way, not because they lacked feeling, but because feeling had begun to return without permission. This may hurt, I said, his mouth curved with no humor. Most true things have tonight. I lifted my hand. Sorel jerked against his grip. If she returns trust first, you will trust the wrong person. That is what the tree is doing. It chose her. It will make you choose her. I stopped. The accusation found its mark. Not in Vaelor, in me. Because some part of me had already felt the pull between us. Root and fire, wound and recognition, bride found and heart awake. I did not want a bond made by a tree, by law, by desperation, or by another woman's crime. I had been brought here as an emergency bride, a cursed body meant to satisfy restless houses. I would not become a prettier prison. Vaelor saw the doubt cross my face. He released Sorel so abruptly she stumbled back. Gasps broke across the court. He turned both empty hands toward me. She is right about one thing, he said. I will not have the tree choose for me. The Ember Vein Tree stilled. Even the roots stopped moving. Vaelor stepped away from the root heart, away from Sorel, away from me, placing distance where every power in the grove seemed determined to create binding. If my trust returns, he said, voice carrying through the ashen grove, it returns as mine. Not Sorel's, not the court's, not the tree's, not yours unless I give it. Something inside my chest eased. The trust ember did not dim. It steadied. The tree answered in root script across the open heartwood. Choice recognized. Sorel stared at the words as if they had betrayed her. Vaelor looked back at me. Can you guide it without claiming it? The question struck harder than praise would have. Could I? I was tired, frightened, filled with fire that did not belong to me, and surrounded by people waiting for proof that cursed brides always destroyed what they touched. I thought of my mother's ruined line. Ashenmere women called bad omens because old rites had been twisted into executions. Brides burned so kings could remain cold. Hearts preserved so fear could rule with a beautiful face. I can try, I said. Vaelor gave one sharp null. Not surrender. Consent. I placed my palm against his chest. The trust ember left me. It passed from my body into his like a thin red-gold thread, returning to a forgotten path. Vaelor's breath caught. His dragon shadow arched behind him, claws digging into the stone, hollow chest flaring as the ember entered. For one breath, nothing happened. Then Vaelor staggered. I caught his arm before I could think. The contact sent heat through both of us. His eyes opened. They were no longer only molten amber. They were alive with pain. And in the root heart behind us, the next stolen ember lit. Grief. Sorella made a broken sound. No, she whispered. Not that one. The Ember Vein Tree beat once. slow and merciless. A memory rose in the air between us. Vaelor standing over a row of burned plague graves, face blank, while his dragon, Shadow, screamed silently behind him. The grief ember tore free from the roots and flew toward me like a falling star. The grief ember struck before I could prepare for it. Trust had burned like a path. Grief burned like a room full of locked doors opening at once. I dropped to one knee beside the root heart, both hands pressed against the black stone as Vaelor's stolen sorrow tore through me. It was not one grief, it was years of it, compressed into a single ember until it had become almost too dense to feel. Plague graves, children wrapped in ash cloth, dragon soldiers coughing fire from their lungs, a mother kneeling outside the palace gates because her son had died carrying medicine that never reached the lower streets. Vaelor standing before all of it with an empty face, while his dragon shadow clawed at the air behind him, trying to mourn with a heart that had been buried in a tree. I tasted smoke, then Zalt, tears. Not mine, his. The court blurred around me. Vaelor moved toward me, but stopped when the roots lifted between us, warning him away. His face had changed since the trust ember returned. Not softer exactly. More wounded, more present. His eyes followed every shake of my breath as if he could feel the ember cutting through me. Ilyra, he said. My name in his voice was no longer cold. That frightened me, more than the pain. Sorel stood near the silver canopy, one hand gripping the gold leaves at her crown so tightly they bent beneath her fingers. Do not let her return that one. Vaelor did not look away from me. Why? Sorel's answer came too quickly. Because grief is what the plague left you. If it returns, it will swallow the fire with it. The Ember Vein Tree. Beat once. False. Sorel flinched. The roots around the heart shifted, and another memory opened. This one, sharper than the rest. Vaelor stood in the plague court after his recovery, days after Sorel buried his heartfire. A line of common mourners waited outside the black gates, each holding a death token. Their families had died when palace healers were pulled from the lower districts to save nobles first. Vaelor listened to the report without expression. Sorel stood at his side. A council lord said, "The lower streets will riot if we admit the healers were recalled." The old Vaelor might have raged. The hollow Vaelor only asked, "What is required?" Sorel answered before anyone else. "A week of mourning bells. Food distribution. No confession." Vaelor nodded. Outside, the mourners began to sing for the dead. His dragon shadow bowed its head and wept black sparks no one saw. The memory vanished. I looked up, breathing hard. You did not fear his grief would kill him. Sorel's eyes flashed. You feared it would make him answerable. The grove went quiet. Vaelor turned to her then. The returned trust in him made the betrayal worse. I could see it cut through him. He was not merely hearing what she had done. He was beginning to feel the years of choices made through absence. "How many?" he asked. Sorel's lips parted. "How many times did you use my emptiness to keep the court clean?" Her voice trembled, but she lifted her chin. "As many times as I had to." A low growl rolled through Vaelor's dragon shadow. The grief ember inside me surged toward him. I cried out. Vaelor stepped forward despite the roots. "Tell me how." I pressed one shaking hand to my chest. "It wants to return, then give it back. If I give it back all at once, it may break you." His mouth tightened. "Then let it break what should have broken years ago." The words struck the tree. Root script flared across the bark. Consent given. The roots lowered. I stood slowly. Each movement hurt. The grief ember had filled my ribs with mourning that did not belong to me, but some of it had begun to answer my own. I thought of every girl called cursed, because her pain made other people uncomfortable. Every bride burned, because she awakened too much truth in a king meant to stay cold. I reached for Vaelor. This time he met me halfway, not touching, until my palm touched his chest first. The grief ember left me. It entered him like a blade returning to its wound. Vaelor went rigid. His dragon shadow threw back its head, wings flaring across the grove. Red gold fire burst through the hollow in its chest, then collapsed inward. Vaelor's hand closed over mine, not to hold me there, but because the force of grief nearly drove him to his knees. The court saw the Dragon King weep. Only one tear, a single line of red gold fire sliding from the corner of his eye. But it was enough. The Ember Vein Tree groaned, and all the smaller stolen embers in its roots flickered in answer. Brides, kings, mates, heartfires hidden too long under law and fear. Sorel stared at Vaelor's tear as if it were an execution. "No," she whispered. "You cannot feel that and still rule." Vaelor looked at her through the pain. "I should never have ruled without it." The grove shuddered. The grief ember settled into him, not cleanly, not gently, but truly. Behind him, his dragon shadow's chest burned brighter, no longer hollow, though the heartfire itself still remained trapped in the root heart. 2 embers had returned now. Trust, grief. The tree's roots pulled back from my arm, leaving red gold lines beneath my skin like living veins. For a moment, I thought the rite might pause. Then the root heart opened wider. A 3rd ember rose. This one did not fly toward me. It hovered between Vaelor and Sorel, bright and trembling, as if it had been the most dangerous piece to return. Desire. The court drew in a single breath. Sorel's face emptied. Then she smiled, not with warmth, with desperation. "If that returns," she said softly, "ask the tree whom it remembers wanting first." The desire ember hovered between Vaelor and Sorel, like a flame afraid of its own name. No one in the ashen grove breathed freely. The court had watched trust return. It had watched grief cut the Dragon King open before them. But desire was different. Desire made nobles lean forward, and priests look away. Desire made old alliances tremble, because courts could manage duty, bargain with grief, even decorate sacrifice until it resembled honor. But desire chose, and choice had always frightened people who ruled through arrangement. Sorel stood beneath the silver canopy, red silk glowing in the ember light, her broken smile sharp with one last hope. "Ask it," she said again. "Ask the tree whom he wanted before you." The words struck me more deeply than I wanted them to. I hated that. I hated that after everything revealed, after seeing his heartfire buried, his trust stolen, his grief weaponized, some human part of me still feared being only the woman who arrived after another woman had already owned the most important rooms inside him. Vaelor saw the thought cross my face. He stepped back, not from the ember, from me. The space he created was deliberate, painful, respectful. "Ilyra," he said, voice low, roughened by returned grief. "You do not have to carry this one." The desire ember pulsed. The Ember Vein Tree answered with a low beat, neither agreement nor refusal. Sorel laughed softly. "How noble. But if she refuses, the ember returns to the roots, and if it remains there, your heartfire cannot fully wake." The old ash priest lowered his head. "She speaks true." Vaelor's eyes turned toward him. The priest swallowed. "Desire is not merely flesh, Your Majesty. In dragon heartfire, it is the force that moves life toward chosen warmth. Without it, the heart may beat, mourn, and trust, but it cannot bond." The court heard. So did I. The ember trembled between us, bright enough to paint Vaelor's face in red gold light. He looked at it with something close to dread, not because he feared wanting, because he feared wanting falsely, because for years he had lived with parts of himself arranged by Sorel's hand, and now even his own heart could feel like a trap. I understood that too well. I had been dragged here as a bride by royal order. The tree had called me bride. The roots had recognized me. The court was already reshaping the word around us, hungry to turn revelation into destiny before either of us had time to choose what it meant. I looked at the ember. "Show it," I said. "Vaelos, gaze snap to me." Sorel went very still. I raised my voice so the grove could hear. "Not who he belongs to, not who he must desire. Show what was stolen." The Ember Vein Tree beat once. The desire ember opened. A memory rose in the air. Vaelor and Sorel stood years before in the eastern palace garden, before plague fire, before the tree, before love became a cage. They were younger, beautiful, dangerous, alive. Sorel kissed him beneath red lantern flowers, and Vaelor kissed her back with the fierce hunger of a man who had not yet learned to fear softness. The court watched. My chest tightened. The memory did not lie. He had wanted her. Sorel's eyes shone with triumph and pain. There, but the ember did not stop. The memory shifted. Vaelor after the plague, heartfire buried, standing beside Sorel in a marriage chamber prepared with gold sheets and dragon candles. She touched his face. He tried to respond. His hand lifted to her waist, then froze. Not in disgust. Not rejection. Absence. Sorel's expression broke. "You are tired," she whispered. He stared past her, as if the part of him that should have reached back had been left under roots. The memory shifted again. Months later, a court feast. A noblewoman laughed near Vaelor's chair, clearly hoping to catch the king's eye. Sorel watched from across the hall. Vaelor did not react. Not to beauty. Not to invitation. Not to anything. Sorel's relief was immediate. Then came another memory. Sorel alone at the Ember Vein Tree, one hand pressed to the bark. "If I cannot have his desire," she whispered, "no one will." The ember flared. The court recoiled. Zarel's triumph died. Vaelor looked at her, not with anger first, but with the horror of a man seeing the exact moment love became theft. "You did not keep my desire because it belonged to you," he said. Sorel's lips trembled. "You kept it because it stopped belonging to anyone," the tree answered. "True." The word burned through the bark. The desire ember turned toward me. I stepped back. "No," I said, before anyone could speak. "Not into me." The grove went silent. I looked at Vaelor. "If this returns through me, the court will say the tree made you want me. Sorel will say I stole what she buried. The priests will call it proof of bride claim. Vaelos eis Helmine. And what do you say?" "I say desire should return to the man it was taken from before anyone asks where he points it." The ember steadied. The Ember Vein Tree's roots withdrew from my skin and moved toward Vaelor. Sorel made a choked sound. "It cannot. It needs a bride to guide it." "No," I said, understanding as the roots moved. "It needed a witness to name it clean." Vaelor stood perfectly still as the desire ember entered his chest. The impact drove him back one step. His dragon shadow flared behind him, wings spreading so wide the upper branches cracked. Red gold fire surged through the hollow chest, and this time the sound that tore from the beast was not pain. It was hunger waking after years of burial. Vaelor's eyes found mine. Heat lived there now, dangerous, real, and immediately restrained. He looked away first. That was why I trusted it more than any vow. The tree beat hard enough to shake ash from every branch. Trust returned. Grief returned. Desire returned. The root heart opened fully, revealing the central heartfire still bound in black roots. Sorel fell to her knees, without the stolen embers to guard it. Her shadow hand around the heartfire began to burn. "No," she whispered. "If he gets it all back, he will remember the last thing I cut." Vaelor turned. "What last thing?" The Ember Vein Tree answered before she could. A final ember rose from the deepest root, small, white-hot, nearly unbearable to look at. Love. The love ember rose from the deepest root, like a star being pulled from a grave. It was smaller than the others. That made it worse. Trust had burned red gold. Grief had weighed like molten iron. Desire had flared bright enough to shake the branches. But love came almost silently, white-hot at the center, wrapped in a thin shell of black root that cracked and healed, as if the Ember Vein Tree itself could not bear to hold it and could not let it go. Vaelor stared at it. For the first time all night, the Dragon King looked less like a ruler and more like a man standing before the one wound he had not known he was missing. Sorel remained on her knees beneath the silver canopy. Her gold leaf crown had slipped sideways, tangled in her pale hair. The shadow hand still wrapped around Vaelor's heartfire inside the tree, but its fingers were burning now, blackening at the edges as the stolen embers returned one by one. "Do not," she whispered. No one knew whether she spoke to me, to Vaelor, or to the tree. The love ember pulsed once. The whole grove answered, not loudly, not with spectacle. Every dragon lowered its head. Every ash priest went silent. The nobles who had watched me arrive, expecting entertainment, now stood as if the air had become too sacred to breathe carelessly. Vaelor's voice was rough. "What did you cut?" Sorel looked up at him. For once, no mask returned quickly enough. "I cut the part that would forgive me," she said. The words entered the grove like poison. Vaelor did not move. Sorel's mouth trembled. But she continued, as if some part of her had been waiting years to confess, and another part still hated the sound of truth. "When you woke after the plague, you still knew what I had done. Not fully, but enough. You looked at me and I saw it, the hurt, the question, the mercy. You would have forgiven me if I had returned your heartfire then." Her eyes filled, but no tear fell. "And then you would have left me." The love ember opened. A memory rose. Vaelor lay weak beneath the Ember Vein Tree after the first rite, his face pale from surviving death. Sorel sat beside him with one hand pressed to his chest, where the fire had been taken. His eyes opened, dim but aware, and he looked at her not with hatred, not even fear, with broken tenderness. "You were afraid," he whispered in the memory. Sorel began to weep. "I saved you. I know. That was the moment. The court saw it. I saw it." Sorel had been offered the one thing her control could never buy. Forgiveness, freely given, by a man still whole enough to choose it. Then her face changed. She leaned over him, kissed his brow, and whispered, "Sleep without that part." The root beside his heart flared. The white-hot ember tore from him. Vaelor's eyes emptied. The memory vanished. In the present, Vaelor's breath left him, as if the old wound had finally struck late. The Ember Vein Tree carved one word across its bark. Merce. Sorel bowed her head. "I loved you," she whispered. Vaelor's voice was quiet. "You loved possession after fear killed trust." She flinched. The love ember turned toward me. Every instinct in my body told me to step back. This was not mine. None of his stolen heart had been mine. I had carried trust and grief only because the tree needed a bridge. I had witnessed desire so it could return clean. But love was different. Love could be mistaken too easily for destiny, for claim, for reward. For every story the court wanted to tell after it had finished calling me cursed, I looked at the tree. No. The roots trembled. I forced myself to stand straighter, though fire still ran in thin lines beneath my skin. I will witness it. I will not carry it. A shocked murmur moved through the court. Sorel lifted her face slowly. Vaelor looked at me. Unreadable. I met his eyes. If love returns through me, they will say I gave it shape. They will say whatever you feel after this belongs to the bride the tree chose. They will call it bond, fate, debt, magic, anything except yours. The Ember Vein Tree pulsed once. Not rejection, consideration. Vaelor stepped forward, stopping just beyond the love ember's light. Ilyra is right, he said. The court went still. He looked at the old ash priest. Is there another way? The priest's face had gone grey. A royal heartfire can receive its own love only if the wound that took it is named without defense. Vaelor turned to Sorella. The grove seemed to tighten around her. Sorel stared at the ember, as if it were the last warm thing in the world. I was afraid. Vaelor said nothing. She swallowed. I was afraid you would die. Then I was afraid you would live and not need me. Then I was afraid you would love someone who had not cut pieces out of you to keep you close. The love ember burned brighter. The shadow hand around the heartfire cracked. Sorel's voice broke. I was afraid you would forgive me and still leave. Vaelor closed his eyes. When he opened them, grief and trust and desire all lived there now, raw and terrible. You were right to fear that, he said. The love ember flew into his chest. Vaelor fell to one knee. Delius harring across the sky above the open roof, red gold fire pouring through the hollow until there was no hollow left. The grove shook. The Ember Vein Tree bent toward him, branches creaking as if bowing under the weight of a heart returning to its owner. Sorel screamed as the shadow hand inside the tree burned away. The central heartfire tore free from the root heart. For one impossible moment, it hovered between Vaelor and me, a living sun, red, gold, wild, scarred by years of burial but still beating. Then it slammed into him. Vaelor's armor cracked down the chest. Fire burst through the seams. I thought he would burn. The court thought so too. But Vaelor lifted his head, teeth clenched, one hand pressed to the stone, and held the heartfire inside his own body, as if learning how to survive being alive again. His dragon shadow roared. This time, the roar had a heart. The Ember Vein Tree released me. Every root slid from my skin and sank back into the earth. The black petal mark on my collarbone no longer looked like dying flame. Its 3 petals had opened into red gold veins, shaped like a living ember blossom. The ash priest whispered, Ember, Vein Bride. Vaelor rose slowly. His eyes found mine. Heat lived there. Pain, too. Gratitude. Danger. Want carefully held behind choice. He took one step toward me, then stopped. Before the court could mistake the moment for claiming, before Sorel could call it magic, before I could decide whether to fear it, he bowed his head, not as a king rewarding a bride, as a man whose heart had returned and knew exactly who had refused to steal it. Ilyra Vale, he said, voice carrying through the grove. You witnessed what was buried. You returned what was mine without taking it for yourself. The Ember Vein Tree beat once behind him. Bride found. It whispered again. This time, Vaelor answered. Bread is not command. The court fell silent. He looked at me, and the fire in his chest dimmed to something survivable. If you stand beside me, he said, it will be because you choose to, not because a tree, a court, a curse, or my need names you. The words struck me deeper than any root. Sorel laughed once from the ground, broken and hollow. And if she walks away? Vaelor did not look at her. Then my heart will hurt, he said, and it will be mine. The Ember Vein Tree shuddered. Across its bark, The old bride-burning lore cracked in red gold light. The first lore fell away, then another. Then all the names of the brides it had burned began to rise from the roots. The names rose from the roots, like embers learning to breathe. At first, they were only sparks. Red gold flecks drifting from the cracked bark of the Ember Vein Tree, turning slowly in the moonlit air above the ashen grove. Then each spark unfolded into script, and each script became a woman's name. A bride burned for awakening a king's mercy. A bride burned for carrying root fire too strongly. A bride burned because her heart answered before the court had chosen her. One by one, the names circled the tree, and the court that had once cheered the old rite found itself standing beneath the women it had called false. I could not read all the names. Some were written in old dragon script, some in root marks older than the palace, some in ash language I felt rather than understood. But I knew what they were. Not accusations alone. Witnesses. The Ember Vein Tree had kept them. Not kindly, but faithfully. Lady Sorrel knelt at the base of the silver canopy, one hand pressed to her burned wrist, where the shadow hand had been torn from Vaelor's heartfire. Her face looked hollow now, stripped of the calm beauty the court had mistaken for devotion. The gold leaf crown had fallen beside her. One delicate branch snapped clean in half. She stared at the rising names with hatred and grief tangled so tightly I could not tell where one ended. "You will let them blame me for all of it," she whispered. Vaelor stood a few paces from me. His armor cracked over his chest where red gold heartfire glowed beneath the broken plates. His dragon shadow towered behind him, no longer hollow, no longer starved, but not whole in any easy way. Fire had returned to it. Yes, but so had the pain that fire carried. "No," he said, "I will let them name what you did." Sorrel laughed weakly. "And the court, the priests, the kings who let the tree burn bride after bride because a warm-hearted ruler frightened them. Will you name them too?" The Ember Vein Tree beat once. The names brightened. Vaelor turned toward the ash priests. No one looked back at him directly. The old priest who had spoken before lowered himself to his knees. "Your Majesty, the rite was older than any of us." "That is not an answer. It was law. That is not innocence." The priest flinched. I watched Vaelor speak, and understood the first cost of his returned heart. A hollow king could punish one woman and call the matter done. A king with his grief restored had to see the roots of the thing, not merely the hand caught holding the blade. The tree knew it too. Its bark split along the lower trunk, revealing a dark hollow beneath the root heart. Inside lay dozens of pale ash rings, bridal bands, charred but unbroken. Each one had been taken from a woman the court said the tree rejected. The old priest bowed his head lower. "Those were kept as proof." "No," I said before I could stop myself. Every face turned toward me. I stepped toward the hollow. The red gold veins beneath my skin had dimmed, but the ember blossom on my collarbone still glowed faintly, open and alive. I reached into the tree and lifted one of the ash rings. It did not burn me. It warmed. "These were not proof," I said. "They were remains." Silence spread through the grove. Then the ring in my palm released a memory. A young bride standing where I had stood, her hair braided with white flowers, her face pale but determined. The court was different then. Older banners, different throne, same hunger. She pressed her hand to the Ember Vein Tree, and the roots flared bright. A dragon king at the altar reached toward her, recognition lighting his face. Then a priest shouted, "False bride!" The roots changed color, not naturally, by command. A hidden blade cut the king's palm, feeding royal fear into the tree. The bride screamed as flames rose inside her chest. The court watched her fall. The king collapsed after her. One hand reaching, too late. The memory vanished. The ash ring crumbled into red gold dust. I looked at the priests. You taught the tree to burn what it should have returned. The Ember Vein Tree answered. True. The word carved itself across the trunk with such force that bark fell like black snow. The court erupted not with denial this time, but panic. Some nobles began backing toward the iron archway. Others turned on the priests. Old houses whispered names they recognized among the embers circling above. The burned brides were no longer distant legend. They were grandmothers, sisters, daughters, traded into rites and erased as warnings. Sorel rose unsteadily. Do you see? This is what heartfire does. It opens everything. It makes one wound become a kingdom's accusation. Vaelor looked at her. Good. She stared at him, let it accuse. The dragon shadow behind him spread its wings, red gold fire glowing through its chest. Every dragon in the open roof answered with a low rumble. Sorel's composure finally broke. I saved you from this. No, Vaelor said. You saved yourself from losing control of me. The words struck her cleanly. She had no answer that the tree would accept. The Ember Vein Tree's roots began to move again, but not toward me. They spread outward through the grove, sliding beneath the feet of priests, nobles, and old council lords. Wherever a root touched someone who had upheld the bride-burning law, red gold script rose around their ankles. Witness ode, witness ode, witness ode. The court that had brought me to burn now stood marked by the relic they trusted to condemn me. I should have felt triumph. Instead, I felt the weight of every name overhead. Vaelor saw it. He stepped close enough that warmth reached me, but not close enough to trap me in it. What does the tree need? I looked at the ember names circling the branches. Not revenge. The roots pulsed. No, I whispered. Record. The tree beat once, steady as a heart. Vaelor faced the court. Then record begins tonight. Every bride burned by this rite will be named. Every priestly order that altered the tree will be opened. Every house that profited from a bride's death will repay her line. The Ember Vein Tree will never again be used as execution, disguised as proof. A noble lord called from the back, voice trembling. And the cursed bride? Vaelor turned toward him. The air sharpened. But I spoke first. The cursed bride is standing. The tree flared. A red gold ring of root light opened beneath my feet, not binding me, not claiming me, but lifting the hem of my white gown in a warm pulse that made the black petal mark at my collarbone shine like living fire. Ember Vein Bride. The tree whispered. Sorel's face twisted. Do not let them crown you with that. I looked at her. For once, there was no sharpness in her voice, only warning. Maybe the last honest thing she had left. The court would do it if I let them. They would turn curse into title and title into cage. They would call me sacred because calling me cursed had failed. I lifted my chin. Bride is not crown, I said. Vaelor's eyes met mine, and something like fierce approval moved through the fire there. Then the Ember Vein Tree opened its root heart one final time. At its center, beneath where Vaelor's heartfire had been held, another ember waited. Not his, not Sorel's. Mine. Small, black-petaled, red gold at the edges. The grove went silent. Sorel whispered, Ashenmere. The ember pulsed toward me, and every burned bride's name turned to face it. The ember beneath the root heart should not have existed. I felt that before any priest spoke, before Sorel whispered my dead house name, before Vaelor turned toward me with the kind of stillness that meant a king had found another blade hidden beneath the first, Ashenmere, my mother's line, the ruined branch, the unlucky blood, the cursed bride-makers, the family the court had dragged from border keeps whenever old dragon houses needed ritual bodies, and then blamed whenever the rite turned cruel. The ember waited inside the tree, like it had been waiting for me longer than I had been alive. Small, black-petaled, red gold at the edges. Every burned bride's name turned toward it, not accusing, recognizing. My knees nearly weakened, but I locked them in place. I had been brought here to burn. I had survived the tree, Vaelor's heartfire, Sorel's betrayal, and the court's hunger for spectacle. I would not collapse now because my own name had become the next question. Vaelor stepped closer, then stopped himself. Ilyra, he said. One word. Not command, not claim. Warning, perhaps. Hors conseil. Sorel laughed under her breath, low and shaken. Of course it was still there. The Ember Vein Tree beat once. Vaelor's eyes sharpened. You knew. Sorel looked at the ember as if staring at a ghost she had tried to keep buried, by refusing to speak its name. Ashenmere was not only tied to the old root rites, they were the first Ember Vein brides, the original witnesses, the ones who could separate true heartfire from court-made fear. The old ash priest bowed his head. Their line was declared unstable after the third burning. Declared by whom? Vaelor asked. No one answered. The tree did. By those who needed brides to burn. The words carved themselves across the bark in red gold light. The court went silent. The ember pulsed toward me again. With it came memory not fully opened yet, only flashes. Women with my eyes standing before earlier dragon kings, hands pressed to the tree, roots glowing not to consume, but to return. A time when the Ember Vein Tree had not been feared. A time when brides were not tests. They were witnesses, Gid, those who stood between dragon heartfire and the fear of courts. Then came the burning laws, the priestly edicts, the noble panic. Ashenmere women dragged into rites and renamed cursed when they refused to let kings remain hollow. I understood why my mark had been called a dying flame. It was not dying. It had been waiting under ash. The root heart opened wider. The small ember rose from the hollow and drifted toward my collarbone. Vaelor moved at once, not to stop it, to stand beside me. Sorel's voice cracked. Do not let it enter her. If Ashenmere wakes fully, every bride, burning record, will answer her. Every root oath, every hidden marriage claim, every house that fed daughters to this tree. Vaelor did not look away from me. Is that true? The priest whispered. Yes. Fear moved through the court like wind through dry branches. I looked at the names circling above us. Then let them answer. The ember entered the black petal mark at my collarbone. Fire opened inside me. This time it was mine. Not Vaelor's stolen trust. Not his grief. Not desire. Not love. Not any heart that belonged elsewhere. Mine. Old. Buried. Black-rooted. Red gold at the edge of every scar my bloodline had been forced to carry. The 3 petals on my skin unfolded fully. A living ember blossom spread across my collarbone and down my sternum. Thin red gold veins branching beneath my skin like roots finding water. The ashen grove vanished into a storm of names. Brides. So many brides. Aurelia Ashenmere, burned after returning a king's mercy. Mirror of the root line, burned after refusing a false royal claim. Thessera Vale, burned because her dragon mate chose her against council law. Nerissa, who touched the tree and did not scream until the priests changed the rite beneath her hand. The names entered me, but not to possess me, to be carried, to be spoken. I staggered under the weight of them. Vaelor's hand lifted. He stopped himself again. May I? He asked. The question cut through the fire more cleanly than any magic. The court heard. So did I. I nodded once. His hand closed around my forearm, steady but not owning. His returned heartfire answered the ember in me, but it did not pull. It did not demand. It stood beside. That made the root fire bearable. The Ember Vein Tree, split open from root to highest branch. Inside its trunk, thousands of thin red gold threads were knotted together. Bride, embers, heartfire records, names of women burned into lore and then forgotten by houses that still wore their inheritance. The tree spoke through me, not in a voice that replaced mine, in one that stood behind it. Record begins. The ash priests fell flat to the ground. One noble lord tried to run. Roots caught his ankle before he reached the iron archway. Red gold script rose around his boot. House Dravener received bride land after the fourth burning. Another root caught a court matron. House Vael sold a daughter to silence root witness. Another wrapped around a young lord's wrist. Inherited dowry from burned bride. Unpaid. The grove erupted in panic. Vaelor's dragon shadow spread its wings, and the sound silenced them all. No one leaves, he said. This time, the command carried a heart, not hollow authority, living judgment. Sorel looked at me through the chaos. Her face was wet now, though I had not seen her begin to cry. You think this makes you free? I looked at the root fire beneath my skin. No, I said. It makes the cage old enough to name. The Ember Vein Tree beat in answer. The court that had dressed me in white to watch me burn now stood marked by the roots of every bride it had buried. Vaelor faced them, heartfire glowing through the crack in his armor. Every bride named by the tree will be entered into royal record. Every house that profited from bride burning will repay her line. Every priest who altered the rite will stand witness beneath this tree until the roots finish speaking. The old priest lifted his head, trembling. And Lady Sorel. The grove shifted toward her. Sorel stood alone now, red gown darkened by ash, gold leaf crown broken at her feet. Vaelor looked at her for a long moment. You will live, he said. Her mouth tightened. You will name every feeling you cut from me, every law you used, every bride you watched burn to protect what you buried. You will stand before the Ember Vein Tree until the court hears all of it. Sorel gave a hollow laugh. Execution would be kinder. Yes, Vaelor said. That is why you do not receive it. The roots rose around Sorel, not piercing, not burning, but binding her in red gold witness light. For the first time all night, she looked smaller than the story she had built around herself. The ember blossom on my chest pulsed once. The names above the tree turned toward me again. I knew what came next. Not crown, not marriage, choice. The tree lowered one root before me, glowing with a new line of root script. Ember Vein Witness of Ashenmere. Beneath it waited my name. Vaelor saw it. The court saw it. The old hunger returned to their faces, different now but familiar. They wanted to replace cursed with sacred, false bride, with chosen bride, shame with worship, as if changing the word could hide the cage. I touched the root script. Ilyra Vale, I said, daughter of Ashenmere's last branch, witness of the burned brides. My name burned into the root. The tree answered not with flame, but with a steady heartbeat. Then the silver canopy above the marriage altar cracked and fell in pieces around Sorel's broken crown. The old bride-burning rite was over, but the whole grove waited to see whether the king would mistake my witness for a vow. The ashen grove waited for Vaelor to claim me. I felt it in every breath around me. The priests wanted it because a king's claim would make the night easier to record. The nobles wanted it because marriage could tame what witness had made dangerous. The dragon houses wanted it because if I became only bride, not judge, then the burned names above the Ember Vein Tree could be folded back into ceremony, softened by vows, buried beneath silk. Even the roots waited, not with hunger, with memory. Vaelor stood before me with heartfire glowing through the crack in his armor. Red gold light pulsed beneath the black plates, no longer trapped in the tree, no longer hollowed by Sorel's hand. His dragon shadow towered behind him, winged and alive, its chest burning with the same steady rhythm as the man it belonged to. For the first time, the Dragon King had a heart the court could see. That made him more dangerous and more human. He looked at the root script beneath my hand. Ilyra Vale, daughter of Ashenmir's last branch, witness of the burned brides. Then he looked at me, not at my white gown, not at the ember blossom glowing across my collarbone, not at the place where the court wanted the word bride to become a chain. At me. Ilyra, he said, voice carrying clearly through the grove. Does the witness root bind you to me? The old ash priest drew in a sharp breath. Sorel lifted her head from inside the red gold roots that held her. The court leaned toward my answer. I understood then what Vaelor had done. He had given me the question before anyone could turn silence into consent. I looked at the Ember Vein Tree. Its black trunk pulsed, alive and watchful. Names of burned brides circled its branches like red gold stars. Beneath the roots, the heart of the old rite still beat, but it no longer sounded like judgment. It sounded like waiting. No, I said. The tree beat once. True. A ripple moved through the court. Vaelor did not flinch. I lifted my chin. The tree named me witness, not wife, not property, not reward for returning what was stolen from you. The Ember Vein Tree flared bright enough to paint every face in red gold light. Bride is choice. The words carved themselves across the bark. Then beneath them, another line formed. Witness is law. The old ash priest began to weep. Not loudly, perhaps from shame, perhaps from terror. Vaelor turned toward him. The bride, burning rite, is ended. The priest bowed until his forehead touched the broken stone. Yes, your majesty. No, Vaelor said. Not because I command it, because the tree has testified, and the witness has named it. The priest trembled harder. Yes, Vaelor faced the court. His returned heartfire did not make his voice softer. It made it heavier, because now every word carried feeling instead of merely authority. Every bride burned by this rite will be entered into royal record by name. Every ash ring kept inside the tree will be returned to her bloodline, if any survive. Every house that received land, dowry, title, or political favor from a bride's death will repay under root witness. Every priest who altered the rite will stand before the Ember Vein Tree until the old records are opened. A noblewoman near the back whispered, "That will ruin half the court." Vaelor's eyes turned toward her. Then half the court has been warmed by women it burned. No one spoke after that. Sorel's roots tightened when Vaelor turned to her. She no longer looked like the immortal red bride of court songs. She looked like a woman who had loved a dying king, saved his body, feared his freedom, and made a prison from her devotion. That did not make her innocent. It made her tragedy sharper. "You will live," Vaelor said. Sorel's mouth trembled with something like hatred and relief. "To be displayed, to testify." Her laugh broke in the middle. "You think there is a difference?" "Yes," I said. She looked at me. I stepped closer, though the roots around her stirred in warning. "A display is what you made of me tonight. A body in white placed before a tree so the court could watch it burn. Testimony is what remains when the spectacle stops belonging to the powerful." Sorelle stared at me for a long moment. Then her gaze dropped, perhaps because she was ashamed, perhaps because she had no answer the roots would not expose. Vaelor continued, "You will name every feeling you cut from me, every bride you saw condemned, every council lord who benefited from a hollow king, every law you touched to keep the heartfire buried. Sorel closed her eyes. And when I have named them all, Vaelor's face changed. Grief moved through it. So did anger. So did something like mercy, but not the kind that erased consequence. Then the tree will decide what remains owed. The roots pulsed once, accepting. The burned bride names above us brightened, then slowly descended. One by one, they entered the black bark, not disappearing, but carving themselves into it. The Ember Vein Tree changed beneath them. Its dead branches did not bloom with leaves. That would have been too easy. Instead, tiny red-gold veins spread through the bark, each name becoming part of the trunk's living record. A witness tree, not an execution tree. The ash rings rose from the hollow beneath the roots and circled the grove. Some crumbled into light. Some drifted toward nobles who fell to their knees when they recognized family names. Some hovered before priests, demanding records. One came to me, small, blackened, varm. I knew it before the tree spoke. Ashenmere, my mother's ring. I closed my fingers around it. The ember blossom at my collarbone warmed, not painfully now, but like a coal, cupped safely from the wind. Vaelor watched me with quiet intensity. He did not ask to touch the ring. He did not ask what it meant. For once, a king allowed a woman to hold her own inheritance without making it part of his story. That was why I did not step away when he came closer. He stopped at arm's length. I owe you, he said. Yes, I answered. The word settled between us cleanly. Not cruel. True. I owe you the names restored, he said. The burned brides recorded. The Ashenmere line cleared. The laws broken. The court made answerable. The tree protected from being used as a blade again. Yes, and I owe you an apology for ordering you to touch what I did not understand. My throat tightened. Around us, the court was too silent, too hungry. I did not want this to become another performance, another courtly scene where a king's remorse turned into absolution, because everyone wanted the story to end beautifully. So I gave him the harder truth. You ordered me to touch it, because part of you still trusted the law that would have burned me. Vaelor absorbed that without defense. His heartfire flickered, but did not dim. Yes, he said. I did. That mattered. Not enough, but it mattered. He looked toward the Ember Vein Tree, then back to me. If one day I ask you to stand beside me beyond witness, I will not ask as a king choosing a bride the tree found for him. My pulse shifted. He heard it. So did the tree, probably. Vaelor's voice lowered. I will ask as a man whose heart is his own again. Knowing yours is not owed to him. The words touched the place in me where fear had lived all night. I did not give him love. Love was not something to hand over in a grove still smoking with burned names. But I gave him truth. Then become a man who knows what to do with a heart before you ask for another. For the first time, Vaelor's mouth softened. Not into a smile exactly, into the possibility of one. I will. The blood-red moon lowered toward dawn. The ashen grove began to empty slowly. Sorel remained bound beneath the tree, guarded not by soldiers, but by roots. Priests gathered ash rings with shaking hands. Nobles were marked by witness script and forbidden to leave the capital until their houses answered the records. Dragons perched along the open roof and watched in solemn silence as the old bride-burning altar was dismantled, stone by stone. I stayed until the first pale light touched the black branches. The Ember Vein Tree beat steadily behind me, not like a buried heart anymore, like one returned to the living. Vaelor stood several steps away, close enough to share the dawn, far enough not to claim it. His dragon shadow rested behind him, chest glowing with red gold fire, scarred but whole. I looked at the tree one last time. The root script had changed. Burned brides remembered. Heartfire returned. Choice remains. I walked toward the open archway with my mother's ring in my palm, and the ember blossom glowing softly at my throat. This time, the court parted for me, not because I was cursed, not because I was chosen, because I had survived the fire they built and made it speak. Behind me, the Ember Vein Tree struck one final beat before sunrise. Not a warning, not a judgment, a heart